Hello, my name is Andy, and I will be discussing video number 2 in regards to the benefits from a legal liability perspective of having one individual making the decisions instead of a group of people or members within an organization. So basically, there's so many actors within a sports league that it just makes sense to have one decision maker. And the role of the commissioners are basically just to oversee the league and the owners to avoid harm. They're mediators of dispute. They negotiate contracts on behalf of the league, and they are mediators of labor disputes between teams, owners, and players. So, according to Mitten, leagues are private entities and therefore do not need to abide by First Amendment constitutional federal rights for freedom of speech as well as freedom of association. And because these leagues are private institutions and it's a private contract bind between the league and its members, rarely do their rules or provisions get successfully challenged in the court of law. And this private contract between the leagues and their players and owners binds them to the league unless, of course, the league breaks its own rules or there's a breach of duty, conflict of interest, etc. So the first example I'll talk about is conflict of interest and why it's beneficial to have one decision maker. And this is seen in Gilder v. PGA Tour, where 9 players had sued the PGA because they banned the U-shaped club from being used in play. And so the reason this was even amended is there was a vote on the board of directors, which was made up of 10 individuals, three of which were non-players, and 7 were players, or they had contractual obligations with the manufacturers of these clubs that they were voting to ban. And so what happened were these 7 players who had contractual obligations abstained from voting, and the 3 other board members who were not players voted, and they voted in favor of banning this. And so technically 3 out of 3 votes, that's majority, and so they banned it. And what the court found was that the board of directors had a breach of duty and they did not follow their own rules in regards to having a true impartial vote. And they broke their own rules and they did not make a decision that was beneficial to the association itself. And instead they made decisions that would benefit them or get them out of trouble. And so that's one example of why having one individual making decisions is good from a legal perspective. The last example I want to talk about, which I like this one, is the Finley v. Kuhn of the decision of the commissioner to sustain the best interests for baseball and the sport itself. And so this one, as talked about in the text as well as the lecture, was the Oakland Athletics were going to trade 3 all-star players to the Yankees and Red Sox in exchange for cash. And the commissioner saw this and thought, this is going to make such an unbalanced competition for the 2 best teams in baseball already, and the Athletics are going to be terrible, and they're not going to be able to compete. And it's going to take away, the good of the game, and fans won't be as interested. And so his thought process was, for the best interest of baseball, I'm not going to let this happen. And of course, the Athletics sued, claiming that this was an unfair decision, and based on past precedent, that the commissioner could not do this. And what the court found was, of course, the commissioner has the authorities to do this. In fact, his authority to disapprove or approve trades is within the contracts that you have between your organization and the league. And I like this example a lot because this avoids a couple things. It avoids conflict of interest between the owners, because on one hand, you have the owners of the Yankees and Red Sox saying, we know you guys want money and you'll gladly take this money in trade in exchange for this talent. And we're going to use this talent and run the American League for a long time. And so that's the interest of the owners. The owners aren't thinking of this decision for the benefit of the game as the commissioner did. They're looking at this as, this is what I want, this is what you want, this works out perfectly, let's do this. And it also kind of avoids an antitrust issue with the lack of competitiveness within a game. And so this, hypothetically could have led to such saturation of talent in those two teams. And if teams throughout baseball had continued to do this, let's say that case had set precedent for teams to do that and the commissioner couldn't override it, then you could see something like we see in basketball today, where there's 3 or 4 teams every year that are going to win the championship because they are so saturated with talent. And so I like this example a lot in how it kind of set precedent to having a fair view of trades and talent and money distribution for the benefit of the game as a whole. And so conflict of interest is a big one, as well as avoiding antitrust issues. A couple of big reasons that I found really important and why it's beneficial from a legal standpoint to have just one central impartial decision maker for leagues and organizations instead of a group or an association making the decision.